20. 1,720 is a bid.
30.
30. 1730. He bids again. 40.
50.
50. He bids again.
50.
Are you up to it? 80. This man means business. 90.
90 here.
1.8. Going, gone. Sold. Congratulations.
Hello, welcome to the First Brick Property Podcast, episode 1. My name is Carlos, which is slightly difficult to pronounce, so since kindergarten I've been called by my initials, KM. I'm the director of First Brick Property Buyers Agency, which is an agency that aims to help you buy property. We represent the buyers in the market as opposed to the sellers, but that's a podcast for another day. Before we get into the show, let me share what this podcast is about and why we started this. The purpose of the show is to bring a casual style to discuss all things property, with education being the key. Our episodes, they're going to range from discussing a variety of topics to having a special guest on or a few special guests on who can share insights into the property world. Whether you're a beginner or a seasoned property investor, I really think this show will be able to further your knowledge and really remove any barriers to getting involved in the exciting and fun world of property. Before we get into this, I must note, I actually did have a co-host that was supposed to join me today, but unfortunately, due to some circumstances, he couldn't make it for episode number 1, but he will be here from next week, hopefully, fingers crossed. We'll get into the show now. So, seeing as this is the first episode of this brand new podcast, of this brand new year, of this brand new decade, I thought it would be fitting to start right at the top, and that is why real estate. Why invest in real estate? Why invest in property? So there's a variety of different ways to make money, and some people would say that real estate investing isn't really that easy. And quite frankly, they're right. In some way. Here are some reasons why people say it's not an easy investment choice. People do complain it takes time to develop the knowledge to understand the property market, which is definitely true. You can't just jump in and buy the first property you see. It can take months to research areas and find the right investment property. You need to talk to brokers and banks and sort out financing and then sending documents upon documents, just copious amounts of documents. I just completed, I was just with a broker myself not long ago doing some financing, and the amount of paperwork that I had to send was unreal. Then after you've done all that and you actually start looking at the market, which is kind of the fun part, and you finally find it, you find the perfect house for what you're after, it ticks every single box. You still have to go through the process of negotiating with the real estate agent to get a good price. And not only are you competing against the vendors and the real estate agent, you're also competing against everyone else that thinks that property is the best property for their needs. Then say you do get the property at your price that you need, you're actually not done, are you? You need to find a solicitor to perform settlement. And then you're looking at 30 to 60 days already. Then after you're settled, you're not done yet. You still have to screen potential tenants, find the tenant, manage the property yourself, or even take the time to screen potential property managers. It sounds complicated, quite frankly, and it does seem like a lot of work. It doesn't seem that easy. And if anything I've just mentioned, if any of those points have gone into your head and you've just thought, yeah, you're right, it isn't that easy, well, know that you're not alone. But it's why so many people ignore property altogether, and they park their money in the bank or in shares or other investment vehicles. And that's why some people work till retirement, then find that their super, quite simply, it's not enough. So why do we do it? Why do we do it? I've just listed a whole bunch of reasons why it's so complicated and why it's so hard, and why so many people never get into it. So why should we do it? So I'm an investor myself, and I know so many people who have made money or become financially independent or financially free from property. Before we get into why we should use property as an investment vehicle, what are some other methods of making money? Really, there's only really 4 main categories to make money. That's either having a job, working a 9 to 5, getting a wage or a salary, 4 weeks annual leave every year, repeat until retirement, bit of your money goes into super every paycheck, come to retirement, use your super, and hopefully it doesn't run out. That's the first way. Second way is shares. You park your money in shares, in publicly listed companies. You don't really get a say on how the companies operate or what they do, and you just kind of hope that it goes up. Obviously, there's more to it than just hoping, but it is quite volatile. There's businesses, so you can start your own business, which is quite, obviously risky, or if you don't have the passion for your running a business, it might not work. And, statistics show that 80% of small businesses fail within the first couple of years. So there's that method, or there's a fourth method, which is property. So those are the four kind of big branches of making money, or how to make money. And we're going to talk about property. We think property is a great method, so let's talk about it. So why do we do it? Sure, it takes time, but over the long term, it pays off. And importantly, most investors find it really fun. Now, there are two main goals out of using property. The first one is capitalizing on high capital growth potential, which allows you to increase your overall net worth. The second one is to provide secure income through regular rent, for example. Let's delve into a little bit more detail why investing in property is a good strategy. So I've come up with 11 different points as to why property is a good method for investing money. Number one, track record. Real estate or property has a great track record. Real estate has more millionaires than any other investment class. Looking at results across Australia and the rest of the world, you see that property has consistently been the major source of wealth for these millionaires. Success leaves clues. If successful people are doing it, if wealthy people have been doing it for years and years, why don't we learn from them? Why don't we follow suit? Because it clearly works. Success leaves clues is a very important quote. That's number one. Quite easy. It's got a good track record. Lots of people have been doing it for a long time. Lots of people have been making money from it for a long time. Lots of really rich people have been making money from it for a long time. Number one, track record. Number two, security. Now, this is a big one. Real estate is a fairly secure investment vehicle. Very rarely you hear of properties going completely bust or broke. Comparing it with businesses or shares like we did earlier, which are very volatile markets or very volatile industries, and due to external factors can go completely under. Even really big companies, really big businesses can go under. But property prices go down too, don't they? You're probably thinking to yourself, KM, yeah, businesses and shares, they can go down, they can go under, but property prices go down too. Well, you're right, it's true. They go up, they go down, just like any other market. However, even taking into consideration the ups and downs of a property market, the underlying trend of property prices in major cities is steady growth. Now, before I move on, just going to make a quick point. On our Facebook page, there is a bar graph that shows the property price changes over the last 30 years in the different cities of Australia. So you head onto our Facebook page and you'll be able to find that graph, and you can see how property prices in each city over the last 30 years have changed. Moving on. Besides the the underlying trend of property prices always kind of steadily growing, the banks, more importantly than anything, believe they are a secure investment. Banks have always seen residential property as a safe and secure investment class. And that's why they'll lend up to 90% against the property, and sometimes even more. In some cases, you can lending up to 95 and pushing 100% sometimes. There is no other investment class that banks will lend against this highly. Not shares, not business, not personal loans, nothing. But why do the banks look at it like that? Why do the banks think it's so secure? Why is it so secure? Well, there's a couple of factors. Its sheer size is one huge factor. But the Department of Land Economics at Sydney University back in 10 years ago estimated Australia's residential dwelling value to be about $2.5 trillion and has been growing ever since. Adding to the value of that, the total market is composed of about 70% owner-occupiers and 30% investors. Now, what is an owner-occupier, real quick? Non-occupier is someone that purchases a property to live in. So they occupy and they're the owners, as opposed to investors who purchase to rent it out to someone else. Think about it. It is the only investment in the world not dominated by investors, which adds to the security. Because if there were no investors in the market at all, if they all left at one time, just suddenly got up and left, the market would still continue to operate. For example, with shares, if times get tough, if the market isn't looking good, people sell their shares real quick. They get out before their share prices plummet. In the property market, owner-occupiers don't all get up and sell when times get tough. The majority of the market don't act according to normal investment trends. Another security factor is that property is essentially a fundamental need. People need to live somewhere, which ties into the why it is an investor-dominated market. As more people come into the country, as the population grows, as more people are having babies, as more people are bringing more cousins and more family members from overseas, and immigration grows, the demand grows, and it continues to grow. The demand versus supply equation is the basic principle for all things in economics. And in property, because of its fundamental need for people to live somewhere, the demand side of the demand versus supply equation never loses the demand. The demand is always growing. One quick last factor as to why it's secure is insurance. You can insure property against fire, damage, tenants breaking their leases, but that's a whole other topic for another day, which we'll make another show about insurance. But just know that being able to insure your property against these kinds of things makes it even more secure as an investment. So number 3, what's the third reason? The third reason property is a good investment vehicle is that anyone can do it. Simply anyone can do it. I can do it. You guys can do it at home. My friends can do it. There really isn't a reason why people can't do it. Property investing is not simply for the rich and wealthy. Linking to a point earlier mentioned that we spoke about earlier, banks will lend up to and sometimes above 90% of the total value of the investment. In that sense, most Australians with a secure job and some savings can enter the market and secure investment. So I don't make hundreds of thousands of dollars. I wish I did, but I don't. But I have saved some cash. And when I went to the bank, I went to the broker and, I was doing all those copious amounts of documents. The bank looked at me and said, look, we're cool with your job. It's pretty secure. You're making some good, decent money. Good on you for saving some cash. You've got a decent deposit. We'll give you a loan. And this helped me get into the market. If we compare this to some other investment types, such as business loans or shares, the banks don't lend as much, which means it costs more to get into the market. The banks might only lend 50%, 60%, 40%, as opposed to up to 90% when it comes to property, which means I have to have a much smaller capital base, to buy the same amount as opposed to in shares or in business. Number 4, it produces income that grows. Property produces income that grows. Another good reason, and it's a very good reason, is the income generated from property. Due to rent that you receive from your tenants, the banks understand that you're not paying for the property yourself and that the tenant helps. So when they do their complicated calculations as to how much you can borrow, they also take into account that the tenant is paying you money, which helps you purchase a property at a higher value. Over the years, rent has increased and outpaced inflation rates. With houses growing in prices too, many people get priced out of buying where they want to live, and they actually settle for renting. This alone is a complete source of steady income. You can also get property that are positively geared. And we'll get into positive gearing and negative gearing in another episode. But real quickly, positive gearing, when a property is positively geared, it means the rent that you are receiving is more than the mortgage you're paying, which means it's putting money in your pocket and your salary or other sources of income are being touched. For example, if if we purchase a property today and the mortgage repayments are $2,000 a month and the rent is $2,100 a month, every month I'm pocketing $100 and the tenant is paying for my mortgage. It's producing income that grows. We'll go on to number 5. Point number 5 is capital growth. We mentioned earlier that property prices fluctuate like all markets. And it's not always rosy. There's ups and downs and lefts and rights. But as we mentioned also, property is a long-term game. And over the long term, property prices statistically grow. Now, when we're talking long term, we're not talking 5 years. We're not talking 10 years either. We're talking 20 plus years. It's a long-term game. Sure, you can make money short term, but the goal through property is a long-term game. Now, not all property are created equal. It's very important to know that not all property are created equal. And choosing the right investment is crucial for this step. The better you buy, the more capital growth you may see in the future. And we're talking in the vicinity of hundreds of thousands of dollars in some cases. This comes down to something called the power of compound. Now, the power of compound is a really interesting idea. There's a little story, and I'm going to say it real quickly now. And I'm going to give you a question, and I want you to answer it yourself. Pretty much, one day a dad goes up to his young son and he says, "Son, I'm going to offer you 2 options. Would you rather take $1 million today, or would you rather I give you 1 cent today and I'll double it every single day for a month?" The child looked at the dad and said, "Of course I'm going to take $1 million today. Why wouldn't I?" And why wouldn't he? It's $1 million compared to 1 cent. Now you're thinking, that was a silly question. The power of compound. 1 cent doubled daily doesn't do much till the end. Till the end of that month, you get to the last 5 or 6 days, and it overtakes massively. Had he chosen the 1 cent, by day 31, he'd be sitting around in the vicinity of $10 million, with $9 million ahead. That's interest. That's compound interest. Now, again, we've got a picture. We've popped it up on our Facebook page and our Instagram page earlier, a couple of weeks ago, and it's just literally called the power of compound interest. And it's a great picture. You go onto our Facebook, have a look at it. It really breaks it down and shows the value of compound interest. So why am I talking about 1 cent and doubling and 1 million and whatnot? What's this all this compound interest? For example, if I bought a property today at $500,000, 20% loan, which means it's $400,000. I've paid $100,000. In 15 years, it was worth $1 million. That's compound. It's compounding, continuously growing. And if I haven't paid anything off, in a very extreme case from my loan, I still owe $400,000 after 15 years. And my property is worth $1 million. I will be up $600,000, for example. Just showing the power of compound there. How compound interest can really magnify your profits. So we'll move on to point 6, but just before, don't forget to jump onto the Facebook page and find that image. It really makes things much clearer there. Point number 6, you can buy it with someone else's money. Here's a secret. You can buy property with someone else's money. Now, I don't mean, go up to your brother and rob him and take all his money, or you're not going to walk up to a property and say, "I want to buy this property," and pick someone on the street and say, "Pay for my property." What I mean is that someone else is the very, very generous bank. Now, they're not that generous because they charge you interest and you're going to end up paying a bit of money. But as we mentioned before, you usually only need the 20% deposit and sometimes less. And then the bank finances the rest. This is called leverage. Leverage is a very important word. What does leverage actually mean? Leverage, or gearing, technically, means using a small effort to move larger objects. So the ability to use leverage as touched on before, allows investors to purchase significantly higher investments or larger investments than they usually would, as well as increase the amount of profit. This alone makes real estate a very, very appealing choice. So leverage, again, we'll just go back to that $500,000 example. If the property is worth 500 grand, I need a 20% deposit, which is $100,000. I'm giving the bank $100,000 and I'm buying a $500,000 property. As opposed to another investment class, if it was a business or shares, where if I gave 100,000, they might give me another 100 or 50 or 150 in great situations. They're giving me another 400,000 here. So I'm getting 500,000. So if I purchase a property at $500,000 with my initial 100, or I get to purchase $200,000 worth of shares, for example, with my initial 100, and they both go up 1%. The 1% of the 500,000 is much larger than the 1% of the 200,000 in shares. This is why leverage is really important. However, buyers be warned. Leverage or gearing not only magnifies your profits and gains, but also magnifies your losses if your investment falls. That's why it is still important to choose the right property. But to just summarize leverage real quick, the higher you are geared or leveraged, the lower your initial investment or capital needs to be. So you get to borrow more money and have less money as a deposit. So that is a great reason to invest in property. Number 7, we'll touch on number 7 really quickly, is tax benefits. Now, tax benefits is a big episode on its own, and we'll have that coming up soon. But very briefly, tax benefits. There's a variety of tax benefits that can help property investors, such as interest deductions, depreciation, claiming capital works, for example. But like as I mentioned, it's a topic on its own. But it's important to know that these tax benefits exist to help investors, and this alone as well is an important part of why you should invest in property as opposed to other methods. Number 8, the 8th reason why you should invest in property is control. Property as an investment vehicle is one of those investment vehicles where you are in more control. There are a lot of factors that you may not be in control when it comes to shares or business. For example, if you have shares, unless you have a majority stake in a company, you don't really get to control what's going on. You get your annual AGM note and asks you to vote on certain topics, but there's another 1,000,000 people, 100 people, 1,000 people also making decisions on that. Same thing when it comes to business. You're waiting for people to walk into your shop. You're waiting for your supplies. You're waiting for this or that. When it comes to your property, sure, there are some things that you don't have control over, but there's a lot of things that you do have direct control over, which is really cool. So what do I mean? I keep saying the word control. What does this mean? For example, if your property isn't performing well enough compared to others in the area, for example, all the other properties in the area have outperformed in capital growth, they're all worth 50 grand more than your property, and you look around and you notice your property is a little bit below the standard of the others in the area, you can do value adding, such as renovations, refurbishments, to increase the value of the property. This also attracts higher paying tenants. And this will bring us to point 9, which is really an extension of this point, and that's adding value. You can add value so many ways. Like we mentioned, renovations, major renovations, new bathroom, new kitchen, new roof if you want, refurbishments of carpets, curtains, modernizing an old property, or even just a fresh coat of paint. Freshly painting the entire house can really bring up its value and can really freshen up the house and really brighten up the house. And when a potential tenant walks in, they look at it and they think this is a great place to be. And by doing some value add and by having control over your own investment, you have been able to increase the value of your property and increase the value of your rent. Renovations and value adding is its own topic as well. There's a lot of things that we're going to talk about today that is its own topic, and today is just kind of a general broad overview of why you should get into property. So for the purpose of today's episode, we'll leave adding value there and we'll move on to our 10th point. And it's a very important point, number 10, is you don't need to sell. So if you're unfamiliar with the property world, you might be thinking, well, what's the point? If I bought that house for $500,000 and now it's worth $1 million, well, I want to sell it. I want to make my extra $500,000. Here's where property really, really outperforms any other investment class. Along with our first secret word called leverage, there's another secret word, and it's called equity. Remember the word equity, guys. It's a very, very important word. With other investment vehicles, such as shares, when the value goes up, it needs to be sold for it to be a realized gain or a realized profit. Not with property. Property has this special advantage called equity. So what's equity? Previously, we mentioned the example of the property going from $500,000 to $1 million. You don't actually need to sell the house to realize that profit. In fact, you can go back to the bank and use equity to purchase more property. So what that means is you go back to the bank and the bank looks at your property and they say, yep, you bought it for $500, you owe us $400 because you paid the deposit initially, and now it's worth $1 million. So there's a $600,000 difference. So if you were to sell the property today, you would have $600,000. Instead of selling the property, we will refinance your current loan against the new value of the property. Now, it might sound a little bit complex, and we'll go into it much deeper on one of our next episodes. But just know that you don't have to sell your property to make the realized profits. And that's a very useful tool because it helps you purchase the next property and the next property. And this is how people build a big portfolio continuously using equity. Of course, there are a lot of other factors with it. You of course have to be able to service the loan, which means you have to be able to pay the repayments. You can't just keep using equity without being able to pay it off. But technicalities aside, just understanding how the equity works is very important to know. You can continue to build your portfolio based off equity. And often that's why property number one is the hardest property to purchase. Once you get number one, because you have to actually save the deposit, physically save the deposit, you have to cut down on spending, can't go out to have nice steak dinners, you got to have, you got to eat your noodles, and you got to cut back on some luxuries, can't buy these pair of jeans, got to stick to the ones you got, because you actually have to save it. Once you've saved it, and I'm not suggesting you save really hard for property one and then splurge all your cash, not at all, but equity really helps in getting property number two and property number three. And again, if you jump onto our Facebook page, First Brick Property Buyers Agency, there's a lot of good content, there's a lot of good resources that will show you, for example, how to build a property portfolio. Just simple cartoon images, simple emoji images that will explain how to do some of these things that we're talking about. Moving on to our final point number 11, as to why real estate is a good investment, is that it is the most forgiving market in the world. What do I mean? So suppose you bought an absolute lemon of a property. You could have bought a worse property. There literally is a lemon sitting on a plot of land. And you bought it, and you found that one, and for whatever reason you thought that was the one for me, and you purchased it, and then you realized that wasn't the one for me, and it wasn't the best option. Don't fret. Because of the nature of the market, which we discussed earlier, which is 70% owner-occupiers, if you hold your lemon long enough, you should be able to break even and even make a profit. However, there's another caveat here. It doesn't just mean you go out and buy any old property. Because if you do buy a lemon, you face something called opportunity cost loss. Opportunity cost is essentially the cost of losing the opportunity to grow and invest again and again. So should you buy a lemon and the price decreases for 5 years before going back to the original purchase price, you are in negative equity, which means you are losing the opportunity to use equity and reinvest somewhere else. So we just spoke about equity, if you remember, about 2 minutes ago, where the property goes up and you go back to the bank and the bank gives you more money based off the new value of the property. If your property, we purchased that property for 500,000 and then it went down to 400,000 in value, you've lost 100,000. So you're in negative equity 100,000. And obviously the bank is not going to lend you more money when you're in a negative state. If you wait long enough, if you hold it long enough, maybe do a bit of value add, or you just do nothing and you just wait, and you just wait and wait and wait, eventually, due to the nature of the market, usually that property will go back from 400 to 500, and then maybe you make a small profit eventually. The problem is we don't want to wait those 5 years. We don't want to wait those 10 years until the property goes from negative equity back to positive. Because in those 10 years, had you bought somewhere else, if you had bought the right property or in the right investment, you'd be making money, making more money. And in that 10 years or 5 years, you could purchase one other property or 2 or 3 or 4, depending on how long it takes to get out of the negative equity. That's opportunity cost that you're losing. The point here is, if you do buy a lemon, don't fret, because you can usually get out of it. You can usually, make a little bit of money off it or break even at least. You just have to wait it out. The second point to this is that it's really important to purchase the correct investments and avoid buying lemons to start with. So don't buy a lemon, but if you do, don't fret. And that's why people use buyer's agents and professional advisors, because it is a large amount of money that you're spending and you do want to get it right. But we'll talk about buyer's agency and other financial services and other property services in future episodes. So in summary of the 11 points as to why you should consider real estate as an investment vehicle. Number 1, track record. It's got a good proven track record. Many people have made good money off property. Money, I don't know. Let's get into the end of the podcast. I'm starting to speak a bit funny. Number 2 is security. It's a very secure investment vehicle. The banks like it, therefore we like it. Number 3, anyone can do it. You don't need to be a millionaire to buy it. You're not buying the property in cash. You just need a stable job. You need to be able to save some money. You need to be able to grind it out to get into that first one. But anyone can do it. We're in a very lucky country. Australia is a great country when it comes to property. Anyone can do it. In fact, that's why so many people from overseas, America and China and many countries around the world, invest their money into the Australian property market, because it's a secure it's a secure investment class and anyone can do it. Number 4, it provides a steady income that grows, and that was through the rent that we spoke about. Number 5 was capital growth, is pretty much the whole reason why we get into real estate, is for capital growth. Just on capital growth and rent, there's a nice saying on these 2 points, and it's capital growth. Sorry, I stuffed it up. I'll start again. Rent is what you get out of the market. I stuffed it up. Rent is what keeps you in the market. Capital growth is what you get out of the market. Sorry, guys, that took way too long to say. But rent is what keeps you in the market, and capital growth is what you get out of the market. So capital growth, number 5. Number 6, you can buy it with someone else's money. So the bank's money. Number 7, there's tax benefits. Number 8, you can control your investment vehicle. You can do value adding, which is point number 9. Number 10 is you don't need to sell because of the beautiful world of equity. And number 11, it's a very forgiving market, even if you buy a lemon when you should be buying a nice, beautiful property. There you have it all. That's the first episode of the First Brick Property Podcast. It has come to an end. that was fun. I enjoyed it. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope you can now see why real estate is a good investment vehicle and should definitely be considered as an option. You can find all our content as previously mentioned on our Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn pages. Just search First Brick Property Buyers Agency or First Brick Property Buyers, and we should pop up there. If you do have any topics that you would like to discuss on the podcast, or if you know someone that we should interview, or if you have any questions, we plan to do some Q&A episodes. Please send us a message on our socials or email us at hello@firstbrick.com.au. That's hello as in hi, hello@firstbrick.com.au. Also, if you enjoyed this episode number 1, I knew we stuffed up a few times. If you enjoyed episode number 1, please subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And if you want to give us a rating, preferably a 5-star for episode number 1, but we'll take any rating you give us. Please do. Remember, buying property is our passion. Helping you do it is our mission. Thank you.